Hello guys, Rukshan here. In this video I'm going to show you how to integrate Django project and React project so we can send data from the front end to the back end and we can get the response from the back end to the front end. So in this video I'm going to teach you how to do that. So the IDE that I'm going to use is Visual Studio Code and React framework for the front end and Django framework for the back end. As you know, we need to know Python in order to use Django, and in React I'm going to use JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and there are some libraries that I'm going to use in the front end project and the back end project. First, make sure that you have installed NodeJS, because to create the front end project you need to install NodeJS on your machine, and also you need to install Python and Django Python library, otherwise you cannot create the backend project. So in this video I'm gonna show you how to install Python and Node.js. I've already installed those two softwares on my machine and just starting the project, and I will put some link to the videos that will help you to install the Node.js and Python on your machine. The link will be in the description box. So let's start creating the projects and integrating those two projects. So first, open up Visual Studio Code, and also you can use any IDE you want. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code for this project. So let's start it. So first, open the Visual Studio project or IDE that you're going to use, and you need to open the project folder that you're gonna work in. So I have already opened that. You can see here my project. I've named my project folder as React Django integration. So I have two files in here. These are for the backend. These are the backend dependencies, and in the settings.txt file I have some content to paste in a settings.py file in the backend project. So let's get into that later. So first, I'm going to show you how to create the front end project. So to create the front end project, you need to open the project folder. Actually, this is the workspace folder. So this is the folder where I'm going to put my backend project and the front end project. So I'm going to open that folder in File Explorer. You can right click on that area and click on within File Explorer. Then that workspace folder will open up in the File Explorer. So once you have opened the File Explorer, you need to click on this address bar and then type cmd and hit enter. Then you will open up this folder in cmd. Yeah, you can see that we have opened that folder in our cmd. So now I'm going to create the project. To create the project, I use npm command. To run the npm command, you need to install Node.js, because npm comes with Node.js. So make sure that you have installed Node.js before you run this command. So the command is npm create read at latest and our project name. So the project name is frontend. So if I talk about this command, if I talk about this command is the command that creates the project. So we say npm create project. We use read as the build tool, and we get the latest version of that build tool available on internet, and then we provide our project name. So we type npm create to create the project, and then we specify build tool that we use to build the project and the version of it, and make sure you separate the version with the build tool name with @ symbol. And then after that, at the end you need to enter your project name. So I'm gonna hit enter. It'll take some time. It'll prompt us some options to select one. Let's wait until we get that. Alright, in here we need to select React because we're gonna use React framework for the front end, and the variant you can select TypeScript if you want, and I'm just going to select JavaScript for this tutorial. And we created our project, and it asks us to enter these 3 commands. The first command, when we execute the first command, we enter into the project directory, and then we need to run npm install to install the necessary dependencies that our project is currently using. And then the third command is npm run dev. Actually that runs the development server, so we don't need that at this time, so we just run these 2 commands. We need to get into the project directory first, so we cd into front end directory because that's our project name. So once we've done that, we need to type npm install to install all the dependencies necessary for the project. And there's one dependency that we need to actually install in order to communicate with the backend, so let's install that later. So let's install dependencies we have got when we create our project. So let's wait some time until they install completely. Alright, now we have installed all the dependencies. There's one dependency that we need to install in order to communicate with the backend. That dependency is called Axios. So we use that to communicate with the backend. So the command that we need to type in order to install that is npm install. Make sure you are in the front end project directory. Npm install Axios. So let's install that. Right now we have installed that, so we can now get away from the front end project directory. Now we're in the workspace folder, so now we need to create our backend project, so let's create that too. Make sure you have installed Python on your machine before you run this command, and once you install the Python on your machine, you need to type this command pip install Django to install Django. Then you can run the command that I'm going to run right now. So the command that I'm going to run in order to create the project is Django -admin start project and our project name. So the project name is backend, and the command that I've used is Django admin start project and our project name. So the project name is backend, so let's hit enter. Then it will create the project, so let's wait that to complete. Alright, now we have created the backend project completely. Now we need to install the dependencies which we're gonna use in the backend project. So in this backend dependencies.txt file, you can see the dependencies that we're gonna install. So before you run the command to create the project, you need to install Django, so we've done that. And then we need to install these 3 dependencies. So I have already installed those, so let me show you the command that you can use to install these dependencies in one shot. So the command is you need to type this command pip install Django REST framework and put a space, then specify the second library that you want to install, which is Django REST framework dash simple JWT, and put a space and specify the third library that you want to install, Django core setters. So this is the command that you want to install. So this is the command that you want to run in order to install the libraries. So here, see it, pip install, specify your libraries and separate them separate each library that you want to install with a space. So then hit enter, then it will install all the libraries that you have put in this command. Alright, now we have created our backend project. I have already installed those libraries, so I don't need to install them again. So let me clear the command. Alright, now you can see here these are the two folders, project folders. This is the front-end project folder and this is the back-end project folder. So in that folder, in the back-end project folder, there is some content that you need to add in order to make this application work. So let's do that. So the file that we're gonna deal with is when you expand the backend. Let me collapse this. When you expand the backend project folder, you'll see another folder named backend. So you need to expand that too. And in that folder, you'll see this settings.py file. You need to open that. And once you open that, you need to scroll down to the installed apps section. So in that list, you need to add something. Yeah, you need to add course headers and REST framework. I think we should add this to REST framework and REST framework simple JWT. I think these are the things that we want to include. Just let me take it back. Actually, I've copied the things that we want to include. So these are the 3 apps that we need to include in the installed apps list. So make sure that you type these correctly, so don't make any typo here. REST underscore framework and REST underscore framework underscore simple JWT and the course headers. So these are the 3 apps that you need to include. So after you've done that, we need to include something, include this middleware in the middleware list. So I will put that at the bottom. Alright, so make sure that you include this middleware, course middleware, in the middleware list, and then you need to include these 2 dictionaries in the settings.py file. Go to the top under allowed host. Make sure you add this and make sure you import this time delta function. Let me show you how to do that. So we need to import from date time, import time delta. From date time import time delta, you need to import that. So make sure you type these 2 dictionaries correctly without any typo. And next we need to include these 2 variables at the bottom of the settings.py file. Scroll down to the bottom and add these 2 variables and set them to true. So once you've done those things, backend is completed a little bit. Like we configured the backend to communicate with the front end. So then the next thing that you want to do is you need to go to the front end and in there expand the source folder, and in there you need to create a file called api.jsx. You can name this file with any name you want. So I just type api.jsx. So in there we need to import Axios from Axios, and then we need to create a variable called API, which is a const, and then I type axios.create, and in in there I need to provide the base URL. The base URL should be the API URL which we have defined in the backend. So we haven't defined that URL pattern in the backend, so let's do that. So when you expand the backend project folder, you will see another backend folder. Inside that folder, then you need to expand that, where you can see the settings.py file. In that folder also you can see a file named urls.py file. You need to double click to open that, and in there we need to actually provide the URL pattern for our API that we're going to build, because front-end project communicates with the API which we have created in the backend. So API should have a URL, right? Unique URL. So let's add that. We need to add another path element. Then in here we need to actually provide our API URL. So I use this URL pattern for the API. So this will get added to the Django base URL. So the Django base URL will be this. Let me show you. So this is the Django base URL that you get after running the server. So this is the base URL, and whatever we put here get added to this base URL. So the API URL for our application will be like this. Alright, so this is the URL for our API, because this value get added to the base URL of the Django project. So I'm gonna copy this one, and we need to make sure that we add this URL in the api.jsx file that we have created right here, and we paste that. So when Axios send a request to the backend, it will append the URL which we have included in the request to this base URL. So imagine we make a request using Axios to this URL, /signin. So if you make a request using Axios to this URL pattern will get added into the base URL which we have defined here. So then we need to actually make another URL pattern for this URL in the backend project to handle the to do the task that we want. So let's do that later. So you need to put this URL, this base URL, in the api.jsx file that we have created, and we define that URL pattern in here, and then we need to tell Django if any user make a request to this URL endpoint, the request should get mapped, should get sent to API apps urls.py file. So we haven't created that yet, so let's create that. So this tells Django if any user makes a request to this URL, that request should be passed to urls.py file in the API app. So we don't have any app named API yet, so let's create that. Open up the console and go to your backend project directory, and in there we need to create an app named API. So let's do that. Python manage.py start app, and then app name. The command is python manage.py start app and app name. So we hit enter, then it will start creating app named API. So let's wait that to complete. Alright, now we have created that app. You can see that app in your Explorer of the IDE. So when we expand this API app, you see some Python files here and migrations folder. So in here you can't see the urls.py file, so we need to create urls.py file, because we have told Django if any user makes a request to this URL endpoint, that request should be sent to urls.py file in the API app to handle it. So because there can be many URLs like this, API/v1/sign-in and sign up, get user info, something like that. We can have many URL patterns that contains API/v1 URL pattern. So because of that, we need to handle those 8 different URL pattern. So that's why we send all the requests that contains API/v1 pattern to the urls.py file in the API app. So we need to create that urls.py file in the API app. So let's go ahead and create it. So now we have created that urls.py file in that. So we need to make sure that we import include from django.urls. You can type that in here. Alright, now if you make any request that contains this URL pattern, that request gets sent to urls.py file in the API app to handle each different URL patterns like this. So we need to go to settings.py file, and we have created an app named API, so we need to add that app to the installed apps list. So in here I type API, so this is the app that we have created. So make sure you add this one, and then we need to go to the urls.py file in the API app, and then we need to import path from django.urls, because we are going to create some more URL patterns. Now Django will send all the requests that user has made to this URL file if the request URL contains API/v1 URL pattern. So then we can create URL pattern like this, sign up, which will create a user, and then we need to actually provide a function to execute when user makes a request to this URL endpoint. So in your API app, you see a file named views.py. So this is the file that you're gonna use to create any views. That means any function that should be executed when a user makes a request to some URL endpoint. So let me create a function to sign up the user. So that will be request and return response Django. Actually, we need to import. Make sure you import these things. REST framework dot response. Import that, and also you need to import some other things. Decorators, import API view, permission classes. Actually no, we don't need the permission classes yet, so API view is enough. So I'm going to say this function should only get executed, the request type that this function accept is post. We can only make a request to the URL endpoint which executes this function if the request method is only a post method. So if we send data using get method, actually this function won't get executed, because in here we say only the request with post method can execute this function. So in here we have defined some URL patterns which ends with sign up. So then we need to import our views.py file in here, and then we say if any user made a request to this URL endpoint, the sign up function should get executed. Sign up. There we go. Alright, in the views.py file we have created the sign up function, and in here we say if any user made a request to this URL endpoint, this function get executed. So the complete URL that we should have in order to execute the sign up function is this Django based URL port /API/v1. So if the request made by the user contains this URL, then that request get passed to the urls.py file in the API app. So in that API app we say if the URL ends with sign up, then it should execute the sign up function. So the whole URL in order to execute the sign up function should be this. So if we make any request to this URL, the sign up function will get executed. So let me put some print statement in here in sign up function. So then we can make sure this function got executed when we make the request to that URL. So let me copy this URL here because we're gonna send some request to this URL using our frontend project. So now we have set up our settings.py file. We have added this content. Make sure you add this too, and we need to import this app list. These three apps came from the libraries that we have installed, and this is the app that we have created using Python manage.py start app, our app name. And then you need to import this middleware in the middleware list, and then you need to add these two variables and set them to true, and make sure you type the letters correctly, don't make any typo. So in the urls.py file we have defined API/v1 URL pattern for our API. So if any request made from the user contains API/v1/URL pattern, all the requests get sent to the urls.py file in the API app, and in there it looks for each URL pattern that we have defined if there's a different URL pattern in the URL, like API/v1/signup. So if it ends up with signup URL pattern, it executes the signup function. So that's what we've done in the backend. So that's the process in the backend. Now let's move to the front end project to make some requests to the backend. So we have some files called app.css, app.jsx, and index.css. I'm going to delete those three files because we don't need those, and we're going to create our own files. So in the main.jsx file you need to actually open that and remove these two import statements, index.css and import app from app.jsx. Remove those two lines and then clear this component, and in source folder you need to create a different file. I will name it as signup.jsx, and then I type export default function signup. So this is the component name, so we need to return return actually I'll just create a button here, and in that button we have on click method. Actually, let me clear that up. And I say when we click the button, send. I will set the button text to send data. So in here, I create another function called send data. So this is the function that get executed when you click on the send data button. So we need to put our function name send data. To make sure this function get executed when you click the button, I put an alert. I show an alert box. Alright, now we have created our component in here, and then we need to import our component in the main.jsx file. So import sign up from /sign up, and then we need to close our component. Alright, now we have created one component in the front end and added that to our added that in here, and also we have created our backend. So now I need to get into the front end directory, front end project folder, and then I need to run the development server by executing this command. The command is npm space run space dev. It'll run the development server for our front end project. So I'm going to open up a new command prompt here, and I need to get into the backend project in that terminal tab. So now I'm in the backend project in the second terminal. So I need to run the backend server too, because front end project and the backend project are separate projects, right? So we need to run a separate server for the front end and separate server for the backend. So backend has a built-in server like front end project does. So the way that we need to start the backend server is you need to get into the backend project directory and execute this command: python manage.py run server. It will start the development server in the for the backend project. So our front end project, the server for our front end development server for our front end project runs on this address and this port. So we can press and hold Control and click on it, and it will open up in the web browser. So if we have created the component successfully and added that to the main.jsx file, we will see the button in here that we have created. Yeah, you see the send data button. So if I go to the signup.jsx file where we have created our component, we create a button, and when we click the button, we execute the send data function, which shows us an alert box. So let's check it out. So let's click on that button. You see we get the alert box. That means that function get executed successfully. In that function, actually we write the code to send the data to the backend server. So let's check the status of the backend server. You can ignore this error because we need to make migrations before we do any task. But for this project, we don't need to run these migrations because we're not dealing with the database right now. So as you can see here, this is the address and the port on which the backend server is running. So this is the base URL that we have defined, that we have put in api.jsx file here, and then URL pattern for our API app. So let's start sending data to the backend. Make sure this is the base URL. If you type everything else I type in my backend project settings urls.py files, so make sure you add this, and then let's just start sending some data. So I'm going to make this function as asynchronous function, so we can create a variable to hold the response that we got from the server. So response, and now I need to actually there's something that I need to do. I forgot to do that. You need to go to api.jsx file and make sure you export this variable so we can use that variable in other files. So type export default API, because this is the only one in this file, so it's okay to use default here. And in the sign up .jsx file, I import API from API. So because api.jsx file stays in the same folder as sign up.jsx file does, so that's why we use import API from the api.jsx file, which stays in the same folder. So then we can use api.post. Remember that when we create our sign up function in the views.py file, we defined only post requests can execute this function. So that's why we use post api.post when we send the data. So remember that the first parameter for the post method should be the URL to which the data gets sent. So in this case, sign up. So what happened when we send data to this URL endpoint? This slash sign up URL slash sign up portion of the URL get added to the base URL which we have defined here. So the entire URL becomes like this. This URL plus sign up. Alright, so this part get added to the base URL that we have defined here. So the entire URL will look like this. So if we take this URL and go to the backend project's urls.py file where we have defined our URL pattern for our API, you can see this URL, right? This is the URL that we're sending the data to. So it contains API/v1 part, right? So now it matches this URL pattern, and it identifies, alright, this URL contains API/v1. So what I do is I need to send that request to the urls.py file in the API app. So in the urls.py file in the API app has this pattern defined. So that URL is this, and alright, we found this portion, and then we got into urls.py file in the API app, and then we have sign up part in the URL. So it takes for each URL pattern in the URL pattern list for sign up. If it finds one that matches the sign up URL pattern, it executes this sign up function. So that's the process. So let's go to sign up.jsx file and send some data. I will put some empty data here. I don't need to send any data right now. Alright, so the response, actually we need to put the wait. We need to wait until this data gets into the server and we receive the response. We need to wait until we receive the response from the server. So once we receive the response gets stored in this response variable, and we can say if the response dot status is equals to 200, then everything is okay, no any error occurred. So we can show an alert box, request was successful. We can show that alert box. So right, so this is the code that we use to send data to the backend. You can actually use send any data you want. Make sure that you add that data as a JavaScript object. So you can send a username and email and password to the backend. You need to enter the data that you want to send to the backend as a JavaScript object. So yeah, this is how we send data from the front end to the backend. Now let's test that functionality. So our backend server is running and our front end server is also running. So let's click on this function. Sorry, let's click on this button, and as you can remember, we have added a print statement in the sign up function, and to make sure to check whether this function get executed or not when we made the request to that URL. So we'll see the backend server log. It says API/v1/signup not found. That means the URL pattern is incorrect. Just let me take all the things back. The base URL is fine, and inside of JSX file we use this URL part, so it get added to this URL, so the URL becomes like this, and then in the urls.py file in the backend project contains that URL pattern. So if the request URL contains that URL pattern, it gets into urls.py file in the API app. Then we define URL pattern, the sign up URL pattern in here. So entire URL will be like this. So what went wrong? Just give me a second, guys. I will find what's the issue here. Alright guys, I found the cause for the issue. So we can simply see that on the console it gives us a warning here. It says your URL pattern /signup has a root beginning with a slash. Remove this slash as it's unnecessary. So the thing that we want to do is we need to remove this slash in here, because in the backend folder we have urls.py file. In that file we have defined our URL pattern for the API. So that URL pattern ends with the /, so we don't need to actually place / in this URL pattern. So that was a problem. So let me click this click this button. You see the request was successful. That means we have successfully communicated with the backend from the front project. So yeah, that's how we actually communicate with the front end, communicate with the backend from the front end project. Alright guys, this is all for this video, and now we know how to communicate the backend from the front end and send some data to the backend and get the response from the backend, so we can access that response data from the front end. So in the next video we will see how do we send data from the backend to the front end and get those data to do something. In the next video we will be creating a complete chat system with the user authentication processes. So yeah, thank you for watching this video guys again, and I will see you in the next video.